GutPunched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers. Navigating the insidious illness of Alzheimer's is something nobody asks for. The disease sneaks up on you and your loved one, and it feels like you've been sucker punched in the gut. Then you ask, where do we turn for help? Who do we call? What do we do? These questions and more are what we hope to answer and give you some direction and hope. Now let's join our host, Jeff Edwards.
Greetings and welcome. What's happening? You good? Did you have a good week? I really hope so. Glad to have you along with us. We mentioned last episode that we're working on interviews with some very interesting and knowledgeable people. People who are going through some things with regards to dementia and Alzheimer's. And we think you will totally enjoy and benefit from what they bring to the table. It will be worth the wait. Now, in this episode, we will touch on an article about a new Alzheimer's drug that can slow the disease and gets backing from FDA advisors. And in the next few weeks, we will hear from a couple who went through the testing process of this particular drug and get their thoughts and reactions to it. And we'll be speaking with Dan Moser, a certified Dementia Care Specialist, Dementia Caregiver Support Group facilitator, and Florida certified driving instructor / evaluator, and that's someone who tests and determines if someone who has an early onset of Alzheimer's disease or another form of dementia is still capable of driving. This will be a real deep dive into caregivers groups and caregiver challenges, and we think you'll find it very helpful if you're a caregiver. Now, if you listen to GutPunched, the podcast, you'll notice we always ask, what are the 2 rules we follow here at GutPunched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers? Why do we do it? Well, repetition. You want to drive them home so you don't even think about them, you just do it. Number 1, you have to take care of yourself because if something happens to you, who is going to take care of your loved one? And number 2, you can't do it alone. You need help. Find a good caregivers group, network with friends or relatives. Okay, let's get at it.
This is GutPunched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers.
This is an article that came out on June 10th. A closely watched Alzheimer's drug from Eli Lilly won the backing of federal health advisors this past Monday, setting the stage for the treatment's expected approval for people with mild dementia caused by the brain-robbing disease. The Food and Drug Administration advisors voted unanimously that the drug's ability to slow the disease outweighs its risks, including side effects like brain swelling and bleeding that will have to be monitored. Quote, I thought the evidence was very strong in the trial showing the effectiveness of the drug, said panel member Dean Follman, a National Institutes of Health statistician. The FDA will make a final decision on approval later this year. If the agency agrees with the panel's recommendation, the drug donanemab would only be the second Alzheimer's drug cleared in the U.S. that's been shown to convincingly slow cognitive decline, memory problems due to Alzheimer's. The FDA approved a similar infused drug, Leqembi, from Japanese drug maker Eisai last year. The slowdown seen with both drugs amounts to several months, and experts disagree on whether the patients or the loved ones will be able to detect the difference. The FDA had been widely expected to approve the drug in March, but instead the agency said it would ask its panel of neurology experts to publicly review the company's data, an unexpected delay that surprised analysts and investors. I just gave you a snapshot of the article that goes much deeper, and we will discuss that in future episodes as more information becomes available.
Repeat after me. Apple, table, penny.
Apple, red.
When you tell people he has Alzheimer's, but he's in a clinical study, it's
not so hopeless.
Yeah.
Maybe. You know, it's like, I hope we can just hang in there and maybe they'll find something, you know.
Ask me again.
What season is it?
It's when all the leaves down and
I know it's there.
but I can't get it.
Yeah.
And it just kills me.
I remember watching Dad interact with the kids and thinking, geez, in 5, 6 years, will he even know who they are? 1 in 10 Americans over 65 has Alzheimer's disease. Learn more today at brightfocus.org.
I'm on the phone with Dan Moser, Certified Dementia Care Specialist, Dementia Caregiver Support Group Facilitator, Florida Certified Driving Instructor, /evaluator. And if you've heard some of our early episodes, you might remember that name. But I always said I wanted to bring him back because he's got so much knowledge about caregiver groups and caregiver issues. I've been attending, when I can, a men's group of caregivers, and I always learn stuff. I'm always writing stuff down. I'm taking notes where I learned a whole bunch of information from the men's group. So anything you can learn to help yourself move forward and attack the circumstances, it's a good thing. So Dan, how the heck are you? What you been up to?
Hey, Jeff. Oh, I've been staying pretty busy.
Are you still involved with caregivers and caregiver groups?
Very much so. I've kind of chosen to kind of make that my mission these days, working with the Dubin Center as a volunteer and the Frontal Association of Frontal Temporal Degeneration as one of their representatives and one of the local representatives from that national organization. So, yeah, that's those two things, along with taking care of a bunch of house projects that were put on the back burner for many years as I was caregiving.
Right.
Taking care of those.
Right. You facilitate, I guess that's the word, facilitate when you can in the men's meeting. What's the best thing somebody should know about getting involved in a men's group or a women's group, depending on? And what benefit do the participants get out of it, do you think?
Well, I would say any group, mixed, all one sex or the other, doesn't make any difference. The support that you get and the things you learn from others in a way that you can't really get elsewhere, where people are sharing. If you're in a good group, people are very willing to share if they feel comfortable. And it's firsthand experiences you're hearing. So you'll learn stuff from that. You can share your situation and help other people get through things. It's just invaluable. Anybody who's not doing that when they're in a situation with a caregiver is definitely missing out, and for their own sake, more than anything else, for their own mental health and ability to care for someone.
Right. One of the things that I noticed is that you have so many different people involved that are there to either gather information or share information, but everybody's at a different stage of where they are. Some have family members in a home already. Some people are still have their family members at home. It's not one size fits all. It's a little bit of everything.
It is, and that's true of almost any of the caregiver support groups. Although I do one specifically for frontal temporal, but just like the men's group, there's people at all different levels where they're at in their journey. But it works. I try not to have somebody jump right in who's new to like a diagnosis of their loved one or haven't reached out at all. I try not to have them jump right into the group without having a one-on-one discussion with them first. I don't have that chance with the men's group but usually they've come through the Dubin Center and talked to social workers, so they'll be somewhat prepared. But for some of the people, I don't want them to be a little bit shell-shocked and then maybe not want to come back from what they hear. For people that are much further along in it than maybe they are, and there's going to be things that they're going to hear that might be premature for them to hear until they get a handle on things. So, you just kind of have to deal with every situation as it comes up and hope that somebody doesn't, kind of get scared away from things.
Gotcha.
That's what I look out for.
So we're fortunate because we live in Fort Myers, Florida, and we have the Dubin Center. Collier County has their organization. But what about somebody who lives outside of, say, Florida even, in another state? they don't know where to reach out. Now, partially with GutPunched, we try to give out links to different places to get the help. But if somebody wanted to start a caregivers group, what would they need to do?
Well, it depends. Like for me, as soon as we started realizing Maria, my wife, had frontotemporal, as we were researching, even before we knew for sure what it was, before we knew had the formal diagnosis, I reached out to them, the Association of Frontotemporal Degeneration. But by then I was already in touch with the Alzheimer's Association, the national organization. And even though in many ways they're not doing the direct services they were doing before, they're still definitely somebody to start with, because they have a presence throughout the country and they have a network of volunteers that run support groups. And many of the support groups, if not all of them, don't just require the person that they're dealing with to be dealing with Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. It's just pretty much any dementia.
Gotcha.
So that's where I think I would start, especially in places that are rural or, not, like you said, we're lucky here with the services we have. And some of the bigger cities have even more, but they're so busy and so crowded. We're kind of at the perfect situation here, I got to say.
Yeah, I think so too. And I've gotten some emails and comments from people saying, well, I live here or I live there. What about me? Where do I find the help? And I try to always to share the links that I have. Obviously, I can't physically put them in touch with that, but that's part of the whole goal, is to be able to share. And if you need to build it. You got to take a step. The issue's not going away. You can ignore it. And we were just talking before we started to record about, there's some people have denial. There's nothing wrong with me. It's you. But if you're the caregiver, or if you're the person who is responsible for that other person, you got to take a step. You got to be, I would say, aggressive, but proactive is probably a better word to find the help. And if not, create your own. There's enough information. That's what we use the internet for. And you can find anything you need to help you take that step. It's got to be encouraging. When you do a typical meeting, do you set out questions? Do you just let everybody talk, or how organized are they?
Well, I'm pretty loosey-goosey on things. I've taken some courses on putting these things together and how to do them exactly by the book. And let's just say we don't do them by the book. The main things we keep in mind is it's all confidential unless somebody is fine and expresses that you could share this, and we're all respectful of each other. Those are really the only things you got to kind of make sure you always keep in mind. But, I went through training when I first hooked up with the Alzheimer's Association. I was just using their services. And then when I happened upon the Association for Frontotemporal, I said, we don't have any support groups down here. I'm going to start one up. So I got trained as a support group facilitator, both by them and the Alzheimer's Association, because we were kind of sharing a facility in places that we were meeting, which was very helpful to learn that. And then I took some higher level ones. But like I said, I think usually becomes organic if you know your topic and you get a feel for things. You don't have to be too formal on things. And I've been in some of these groups where the social worker was very formal on it and made sure everybody had time to talk. And those were great, especially when you have a large crowd and everybody wants to talk. But you've seen our men's group, and the same thing I do with the frontotemporal. I let people who need to talk. And the ones who've been coming for a long time also allow that to happen, and then only pipe in usually to assist like somebody new or that really needs to talk. And we can extend time on things anytime, or people can call me anytime if they feel they didn't have their chance to get something out because it was just too busy. With the large groups, our men's group were 16, 18 people sometimes, and that's about max you want on a group. And even that is a little large for an hour. If we tried to go round robin, everybody would get, all of 3 minutes. And I don't like having a clock running like that on people.
You typically deal with men. Are there female groups?
Oh, yeah. Well, the frontotemporal is mixed, anybody. Okay. And then the only ones that I'm doing that's all one sex is the one from the Dubin, which was started up by Carl from, one of the main volunteers for the Dubin Center. It took off very well. It was an instant hit, because there were many people there that probably wouldn't go into a mixed group or had tried it and said, no, it's not for me. And people feel a lot more, I think, comfortable, especially depending on the age group. Like with frontotemporal, where many of the people are much younger because it's a condition that hits you could be your 40s or 50s. But most of the Alzheimer's folks are in 70s, 80s. And so it's a different different atmosphere. It does. It helps. And it helps to know that you're not alone. That's, one of the main things. People are dealing with things just like you are, maybe worse. A lot of times, this always hit me, no matter how bad things are, you can find somebody who's way worse off than you. And you got to get rid of the woe is me kind of a feeling, no matter how stressed out you might be or tired or whatever, frustrated. You just know somebody's in a way worse world than you are, just in general, but even with the dealing with dementia.
That was one of the things that I learned early on was, okay, I think I have this problem and woe is me. But I listened and just observed and said, no, these people have it 10 times worse. I have no issues based on that. But then you feel for them, and then you reach out, and there's communication. Camaraderie, I guess, is another word that might be used, because especially if it's all men, gentleman number 1 has this problem, gentleman number 2 has this problem, and gentleman number 3 has had them both, and he can then explain what he went through so these people can understand what they're going through. Like anything else, just education, trying the best you can to help make a bad situation a little bit easier. When you have an individual who's already lost somebody or at the verge of losing somebody, they're in a whole different world of hurt versus somebody whose wife's just been diagnosed. So you go, okay, this is what I got to look forward to, but there's so much other information that can come from it. I just can't say enough about caregivers. I mean, I think that's the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, it's like there are so many different aspects of it. To me, some of the hardest that I recall as being a caregiver, I'm just 8 months out of, my wife passing. Some of the hardest part is in the early stages, maybe even before a diagnosis, but for sure when you know something is going south. Everything else, is kind of semi-normal. And all you're thinking of is what is going to happen. What unknown is so scary. Getting a diagnosis, as bad as it is somewhat of a relief because it gives you some direction. But even that sometimes, because now you got to say, okay, here's all the things that could happen while the person is still able to do many, many things that you got to be on the lookout for, that could be scary, safety-wise and all kinds of other things.
Right.
So that to me, and then it gets to be physically hard when the physical caregiving takes over. For my wife, she was in a wheelchair. She fell and broke her neck and was in a wheelchair for the last 2 years along with the dementia. Even though she was very easy to deal with in many ways, the physical part became really taxing. But at least it wasn't frustrating. At least I wasn't, having her be mean to me. And so you pick an attitude a little bit, and how could you not? I didn't have that happen, but many, many people do. So I felt lucky about that. And it always made me think, all right, this could be so much worse. I can handle this. Yeah, one thing Carl always says to all the men, everybody that comes to any of the groups is, remember, this too shall pass and you'll get through it. And it's true. In most cases, I would hope. Although, you've said this, the statistic that a certain percentage of caregivers do die before the loved one passes.
When you think about it, it's you never know. And so you do the best you can. At what point do you think that there are a lot of people that will keep their spouse, their loved one home, as opposed to putting them in a facility? Not everybody can afford that. But at what point do you think that's somebody should recognize and say, maybe we need more help than what we have? Is there a
There's no single answer or guide, but usually it takes some kind of an event and an outsider's view of it, whether it be medical people or other family people, to say, you're killing yourself, and your quality of the care you're giving is reflective of that. For me, we did everything we could to keep Maria home because it was the same price as putting Maria somewhere where there was care. But the care is different when you do that. You become now the overseer and get frustrated because you don't have control. At least at home, if you're hiring people and all, you've got control. Yeah. The medical model can take over. Like, say, for instance, somebody has a fall. Maria was in the hospital recovering from that for up 2 months between rehab and all. She was able to come home. Some people never can come home from there because the conditions at home aren't appropriate for it. You can't handle it because of the medical needs. So, again, there's no one answer, but usually there's an outside influence. Sometimes a facility won't release the person home knowing that the care cannot be provided properly there. So you're going to have to take action and find a place. Of course, money's always an issue, but it isn't inexpensive to keep someone home either if you're providing the kind of care that is necessary in many cases.
Are there facilities that let you go out for a day, take care of?
Yeah, respite care. Yeah, it's hit and miss. If you contact the area aging to find out kind of what is available to you, but things like the Veterans Administration has programs for veterans and their families. There are other programs that the state and federal have, but generally speaking, for just basic care and companion care, things like that, there's nothing that's really free, but there are programs out there that do provide it here and there. We didn't use any of it. I always felt that since we could afford to be hiring people and pay them to be here, that was more appropriate because there was many people out there that couldn't afford that, and they needed those respite people and those programs, and we didn't want to tap into those things.
Right.
There's a waiting list in most cases for a lot of them.
Very interesting to learn some of these things, but also as you try to learn them or understand them, you have to be able to look for what's available. I had a conversation with somebody last week who I probably will be interviewing somewhere down the road. Located in Bonita, and for respite care, one of his focuses are the ex-military, people who have been in the service and who are they need help. That's one of the things he himself wants to focus on because they need the help. And so I don't know, what he charges, but the fact that that's what he wants to focus on as an individual that is a franchisee owner. But again, it allows him to get involved in the community and meet more people and offer more services.
They may know enough to be able to tap into things that the VA would provide, and then they just pass that on to the customer to cover their costs.
Sure.
It's great. There's so many things you've got to really do your homework. It's hard to be doing that stuff when you're a full-time caregiver because you think, oh, you're sitting around the house all day. What else can you do? Because you got to be there. Well, guess what? There's a lot of things. You can't spend as much time in front of the computer as you think. Just trying to get to pay bills and stuff like that sometimes becomes difficult to fit it in because of how much physical stuff you have to be physically there to take care of things. And a lot of it's moving targets, and then there's income requirements and stuff like that. In other programs, there aren't income requirements, and you got to dig those out because they're not easy to find. Yeah.
It's a process and learning curve, all things considered. It's the best option you have. You got to endure it, and you have to learn, and you have to do the best you can. And if you need help, you ask for help. That's one of the things we always talk about. You can't do it by yourself. Find somebody to help you. Family, friends, relatives, whatever. Don't try to be the tough guy or tough woman saying, hey, I'm going to handle it. You need help. Ask for it. People are willing to help.
Right. And don't get too frustrated if the people you expect to come to your rescue, like family, don't. You just got to go with who does, be appreciative of it, and don't dwell on and get all mad at people that you think should be doing it. It's their choice. You can't do much about how other people act. That's what we try to tell people all the time about the family, that you're expecting somebody, whether it's your husband's, the family, their side of the family should come through. If you got stepkids, they should come through, but they're not. You got to get over that. Now you want to ask, and they can say no, or just ignore you, but you can't dwell and get more things that frustrate you like that. And we see that a lot. And I think that's one thing that the support group helps people get over is being mad at family members or others that they think should come through that aren't. There's nothing you can do about it, really. It's their choice.
Mm-hmm. This has been very interesting. Totally unorganized, but I knew that you had a lot of experience in this field, and especially since you've been through it, but also what you bring to the meetings that I've been to. Caregivers, integral part of fighting this disease, and no matter what stage you're in. I want to thank you very much for your time with not a lot of notice. I do appreciate it. I know I'll be calling you again sometime.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. Appreciate this show. It really is helpful to a lot of people. I get some good feedback from it. Try to pass it along to you too, as I told you today. Somebody who really thought the classical music stuff was great. I agree with that.
This is GutPunched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers.
We'd like to once again thank Dan Moser for his time and the very important information about caregivers and caregiver groups he shared with us today. Now, this is stuff you can't buy. It comes from going through the journey that may lie ahead of you and your loved ones. You might want to save this episode for future reference. And we hope that if you know someone who has a family member or friends who are dealing with a loved one who has Alzheimer's or any type of dementia, that you would let them know about this podcast. To find your local chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, you can visit alz.org/local resources/find your local chapter, or use the Elder Care Locator. That's 1-800-677-1116, or use the Elder Care Locator online tool. The Dementia Society of America is dementiasociety.org. Now, if you have any questions or thoughts about GutPunched, Alzheimer's, and caregivers, or if there's a specific topic you would like to know more about, reach out to us. The website is gutpunched.com, and the email address is gutpunchedac@outlook.com. A special shout out to Rick Peterson, Ora Santana, Gentry Thomas, Dan Moser, the Dewin Center, and my wife for the tremendous help and support in making this podcast possible. Thanks for joining us, and please come back again for more. God bless.
This has been Gut Punched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers, with your host, Jeff Edwards. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to us on all the platforms like Spotify, Apple, Pandora, and more. If you have a question or want to get in touch, our email is gutpunchedac@outlook.com.